This is Billy
Got it.
Goat from Doomed and Stoned, and here for another Doomed discussion. Today it's with Johni Holiday from the South African band Ruff Majik. They've just put out a brand new album called Elektrik Ram. Excited to talk to the lead singer, Johni Holiday, about this today. So, Johni, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, man. So I would love to know the origin story of Ruff Majik. I've been following you guys for a number of years, not quite the life of the band, but you guys are turning 11, uh, and that's not just the volume up to 11. You guys have been together for 11 freaking years. So tell us how it all began.
That's crazy to think about. I hadn't even realized we were heading up on 11 years. It's it's kind of mind blowing, honestly. Lost track of time somewhere. So it started out mostly with me and our bass player Jimmy Glass. We were the first two people to start Ruff Majik together, I guess. But before that, we were in all sorts of just really gnarly, really bad punk bands. And the idea, we came from a really small town. I think you've known that maybe it's a town called Leidenburg or Leidenburg. But Leidenburg is Afrikaans and it literally means the town of suffering.
Oh,
It's
geez.
not it's not a joke. That's just literally what it translated to, because a
Wow.
bunch of people, when the town was founded, moved there, and then, like, I don't know, almost all of them died of malaria, but they decided to settle there anyway.
Oh my God.
Grew up, so it was weird. Really small town, really conservative, and it had a good mixture of being both a mining town and a farming town. So that's an interesting melting pot of people, as you could expect. And I think initially the idea was just to make noise, enough noise to annoy conservative people. That's what happened. And then after a while we were like, okay, well this is fun, but let's maybe now let's write actual music, and then it just kind of developed slowly. And we've had people in and out of the band since then, but me and Jimmy have been fairly constant throughout the years. We're now up to a 4-piece. Sorry, my hair is doing some really weird stuff right now. So
It's kind of
I'm
got a
just
mind of its own, huh?
yeah, I don't know why.
And
Anyway,
you're speaking of Jimmy Glass, the bassist. You and him have been there since day one, right?
that is correct, yes. And currently we're in a 4-piece mode. So we've got me and Jimmy, and then we've got our guitarist Cowboy Bez, and now our drummer Stephen Bosman.
Hmm.
That's lineup as it is right now.
Yeah,
So
man. Well, I love the sound that you've arrived at. I don't think that you can find dramatic difference between this album and the albums preceding it. But as the press clippings announced, it's a much more experimental. So tell us a little bit more about your sound and how you define yourself.
um I'm not sure really. I mean, if you look for us on social media and see um the way we post, and the kind of hashtags and stuff that we use, we try and use all of them, I guess. um we're always
Smart.
kind of connected in the, let's say, the um greater stoner rock sphere is what I like to call it, but I don't think it's not that,
Hmm.
but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, it definitely challenges, especially the new album challenges, you know, the tendency to put things into to give things descriptions, which is what humans like to do. We like to have a label for everything. So we're going to have to bust out some new labels for the new stuff. But yeah, I'd say it definitely rests comfortably in the neighborhood of stoner rock and what it's developed into for sure. So how many albums are you up to now?
Well, I think in terms of full albums, this is, if we count Seasons, Tar, and Devil's Cattle, this would be the fourth one now.
Okay.
That's technically a full album, and the rest of them were EPs. But the
EPs.
EPs were all really long. I don't know. I don't know what to call these things these days,
Oh
because
yeah.
I've seen this is an EP, and I'm like, yeah, maybe, but that's like an album's length, And then other people are like, we've released a full album, and it's got like only 6 songs on it, and I'm like, but that's not an album, is it? So I never know. I'm just calling them albums and EPs by my definition, I guess.
There's a band out of the UK. It's a drone doom band called Orm, and they just released an LP with 2 songs that span 128 minutes. So you're right. Like, there's no strict definitions here.
Yeah, I think that changed somewhere, but quite a while ago. So people still use the terms, but I don't think they make sense anymore. It's what you want to call it, I guess. So for me, it's if it's more than, let's say 7 songs and up, in my opinion, that's an album. And everything below counts as an EP. And then, I don't know, runtime, who knows? I'm really not sure what to do with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far I categorize them as 3 EPs and 4 albums. And they've all sounded really different, I guess. Yeah, I'm still not sure about the previous question. I wouldn't be able to put a genre tag on it. Not now. Less
Not
so now than ever.
No. Like, I could kind of pull together an amalgamation of different descriptors for your last album, and I had like a ton of starred songs on that on Spotify. I really like Electric Cattle. The new one has been a grower because it's so different. You're kind of like, what am I supposed to expect? And it was helpful to have the backstory up front, because I can go into it more purposefully and say, okay, these are kind of like, well, how would you describe them? Like, are these reflections? Are these character sketches?
I think it was, strangely enough, they were a combo of both, because, I mean, yes, they were character sketches of people that I met, but I explained this to someone else as well. No, don't remember who now. That what went down was I was writing these character sketch lyrics, and they came together, and I'm like, yeah, it's looking great, it's sounding right. And then halfway through, I'm like, no, wait, but this is also describing me to some degree, or whatever the hell I'm. So in each one of those songs, even though they were meant more as character sketches, I did find pieces of my own psychosis in there, I guess. And that was good, I think.
I think that's very relatable. I mean, half the problem with people not getting along is they think they're so different from each other, and we carry a lot of common attributes, certainly common challenges. What were some of the challenges leading up to this album? And maybe that's not a great question. Maybe just tell us the whole stint in rehab and all that shit.
Sorry, I had a really hot sip of hot cocoa just there. So
no problem. I'm drinking tea myself.
If you're wondering about all of this coming out of my mouth, it's not strictly smoke. It's actually just super cold outside.
Oh yeah.
So I look like a dragon. It's crazy. Anyway, I think.
So is it winter in South Africa right now? I know things get a little topsy-turvy when we go south of the equator.
We're entering winter now. It's not supposed to be full-on winter yet, but it's absolutely freezing. So I guess that's just down to weather patterns being weird or whatever. But yeah, right now, it's super, super cold outside. And it just rained, and it usually doesn't rain in the winter over here. So I have no idea what's going on. But I don't know. Maybe tomorrow we'll have snow. We'll see what happens. But it's cold. I'm not a fan of it. So what was I saying? Oh, challenges with the album. One of the main challenges was me heading off to rehab and like mental health facilities to get my things sorted out. Because I don't know if you've ever had to have a working relationship with somebody who was actively losing their mind. It's not an easy game.
For sure.
So as you might expect, there was a lot of turbulence in the band at the time. A lot of collaborators didn't want to collaborate anymore. Some people were sticking out, some people weren't. all fair for everyone's decisions and the way they decided to handle it, because if it was flipped around the other way, I probably wouldn't have been able to handle somebody going through what I was going through, because it got a bit intense. And I think that was our biggest setback in recording the album, just because it made everything take super long. So I would have to be heading into studio, but I would be gone, so completely out of it. And then I got agoraphobia, so I wasn't able to actually leave my house for months. So none of that made things easier on the album recording or any of the dudes in the band, up until I did get around to getting help, which was fantastic. And then after I came out of that, things started to run smoothly again. But we probably lost a good year and a half just as I was down.
I can totally relate. Like, pandemic did a lot of strange things to a whole lot of us. I had agoraphobia for a while too. I had aguaphobia, I think it's called too, where you're scared of water. I mean, not scared, but I just wouldn't step in the shower. Like, I would get anxiety just thinking about it. And that was in 2020, when everything was just so topsy-turvy, and one missed shower led to many. And I know it's kind of embarrassing to talk about, but hey, what the hell, we're human, right? And the point is, I know now what these phobias feel like, and I don't quite understand them, but I do respect how formidable they can be a challenge.
For sure, man. It inhibits your functioning completely, like just being just in the sense of showering, that it's so intense, the kind of effect it has on your brain, because your brain is also really impressive in the way that it rationalizes itself out of some stuff. I had that where I was like, I don't want to go out of my house, and I had agoraphobia, and then my brain being like, but you know what, obviously you don't want to go out of your house. Leaving your house is the worst thing you could possibly do, just stay inside. And it kind of, that whole thing for a while. It took some other people to be like, no, my man, you're losing your mind. We gotta do something about this. I always say that kind of jokingly, losing your mind, but that is essentially what was happening. It's like working before I just stopped working altogether.
Yeah, that's what really made me fascinated to talk to you once I heard about the backstory to the album. Here's another human being who went through something really dramatic as far as mental health, and I had that happen too. So it's good to know I'm not the only one.
Definitely not, man. And I'm sorry that you had to also go through that turmoil. It's one of the most horrible things ever, but there's more of us out there, and we survived, so that's
right. Good. Yeah. So what was it like? Well, what's the culture down there like in terms of asking for help, going to facilities, etc.? Is there shame around it? Is it just something that people have to do and people treat it same as they would a broken foot or something like that?
No, it is more of a shameful experience to a degree. I had, when I got out, when I was better and feeling better and whatnot, I ventured out to make some social media posts just to say, like, listen, I didn't want to talk about this because you're made not to, basically. And then only did I realize how much of a problem it actually was that I hadn't talked about it. A lot of people reached out afterwards and said they're going through the same kind of thing, but they're just, there's nothing, and looking for help, which was great, but also alarming to see that everyone's going through that. I think with South Africa, it's more of it's got a very traditionalist point of view where men don't have these problems. It doesn't happen. You're a man, everything works like it's supposed to work, and you should feel ashamed if it's not working that way. And and I'm not somebody that harbors those kinds of ideas. I feel progressive, and I'm like, no. Obviously, people have mental health issues, they should be watched. But when it happened to me, my brain just completely switched over, and it was like, no, okay, this couldn't be happening to you. You're a real man, you know. You have to stand and face it. And that kind of went to a certain degree. We also have a great number of people in the country, like percentage-wise, a lot, that just don't believe in mental health as a concept on its own. And that's also, that doesn't make the situation any easier. People are just like, yeah, so they don't even necessarily think depression is a real thing. It's just you kind of have to just get over it and do your work, or, you know, not be lazy, that kind of thing. So it's not a great country for that to happen. But that being said, we do have fantastic facilities for it, and we do have complete understanding communities and whatever. It's just always kind of in the back of your mind, you feel wrong for going through that kind of thing, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I told my mom at one point that I was suicidal, and understand, like, there's a part of me that says that isn't me. I don't know why I'm feeling this, but I can't stop thinking about it. Right. And
Yeah.
she's from the old school. And so she had me over, we had some tea and so forth. And she said, I'm going to give you a suicide test. And she had these different questions she would ask me. And one was a demonstration. She put a pillow over my face and tried to smother me. Now, she's not stronger than me, right? So I wasn't threatened by that. I was surprised. And of course, I fought back a little bit, right? And she's like, see, you're not suicidal. You don't want to kill yourself. I'm like, Mom, it's really not that simple.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's I'm sorry. That sounds really...
She's, my mom's a character. She's not a bad person. She's just a character.
No, I can be, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just,
oh, sure,
you know,
sure.
That intense experience. I have it lucky in a sense where my mom is actually qualified as a psychologist, but she doesn't practice as a... she just wasn't in SA while it was happening. She was in the UK, where she lives now. But I had spoken to her, and then at some point she was like, no, listen, you might not be willing to hear this right now, but you're being booked in, you know, we're taken care of. And it wasn't against my wishes. I didn't want to go initially, but I had every right to get there and be like, I'm not going in. But still, I got there and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll sign the papers. I'll go in. Let's see what happens. And which is good, because it did help a lot. But yeah, it's a super intense thing. And the more I spoke to different people who I just assumed were fine all these years, and they told me, no, listen, you know, I've been going through this, or I've been going through this. The more I began to suspect that I don't think there are a completely mentally stable adults out there. You know, I used to think everyone, maybe it's just a few that have some problems, but now I think everyone has a problem, and the one that doesn't have a problem, that's the weird guy. That's the guy we should watch out for.
Right.
I'm joking,
that's the person who's figured out how they can get ahead in the system and may be able to manipulate it to their advantage by manipulating other people. I don't know. That's a little stretch, but yeah, I hear your sentiment there for sure.
Yeah. It's such a weird weird thing.
Yeah, and I think honestly, we're driving ourselves crazy in this world. We're so maybe not such where you live, but I mean, where I live, it's a beautiful country, but yet there's an artificial world that is built on top of it, and it's both actual and virtual, and we all have to kind of work within that strange framework. And I think it's morphed into something that's bigger than we can control, and it's no wonder that we're all driving ourselves crazy, knocking our heads against it.
Definitely, man. That's what for in our new album, the song Shangri-La Incorporated was mostly about that. It was me being angry and paranoid about the feeling of always having to be plugged in and on all the time, you know.
Right.
And I was just so angry at the concept of it. I still am. I don't like it so much. You know what? It's sorry, I just had a low battery warning there, but I'm back. it's a frustration for me because South Africa itself is a super beautiful country, and if I didn't plan on managing a band or making any sorts of money, I would have just lived in the fucking woods somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I would have done. But I need the internet to make things happen, and because of that, I need to be in the city, and that's where all the ugly industrialized parts are, and where you get to really come face to face with extreme poverty and all sorts of problems that you're facing, and in our case here also just heavy amounts of corruption and terrible problems with the government, all that kind of stuff. And I would have been a much happier man had I just lived in the bush somewhere, and not had to contribute to society. But I also do want to contribute to society because I'd like to make music, so
Right.
it's a catch there.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. So, between rehab and the mental health facility, am I understanding correct that you kind of encountered really interesting and strong personalities, that and it's fascinating. I mean, I almost want to see a music video of it, or a movie. And in my mind, I guess maybe we all construct things in our mind, but I'd rather hear it from you. Like, maybe it will help to go through those songs from start to finish here, transition into Elektrik Ram, starting with Hillbilly Fight Song. At first I thought this might be you, and I was thinking about these rough and tumble bars, your punk background, maybe you're this kind of headstrong guy in the song. And you did say there's some reflections there, but you are actually writing about somebody that you met, right?
That is so that one is a very clear-cut example of like a half and a half, because it does have a lot of who I am and that kind of thing to it. It came about, weirdly enough, by a guy that was it was really weird. Some of my friends ran into him at a bar, and he was telling them we're not allowed to go there, as in I'm not allowed to go there either because this is his turf or whatever. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? This isn't a gangster movie. You don't have turf. This is a bar. And then he had this whole thing where he was calling us out on social media, and I had replied with Walk by Pantera. And I was like, here, I submit to you a hillbilly fight song. Let's get down. He never did, though. Never got back to me. He just kind of disappeared from the scene, and I was like, okay, that's fine, I guess. But then, hilariously enough, I met someone that was his spitting image and literal same personality while I was in the clink, I guess. And it was so weird. I was talking to the the type of guy. It's just really like wants to fight time about everything, and his opinion must be right at all times. Doesn't actually have an opinion. He's just the loudest voice in the room and kind of looking for a fight and whatnot. And the thing is, after some reflection, getting through some sessions and chatting and whatever, he turned out to be a not bad guy. He was just going through his own things, obviously, having some issues and whatnot. And one of those were, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a narcissistic compulsion thing, like disorder or something like that, which is just that's that kind of thing. It's word diarrhea all the time, but it's always just about yourself kind of vibe. Yeah, so it was weird, but that was we ended up being friendly with each other, but at the beginning we were very much at odds, so I guess that's how all of the different parts of Hillbilly Fight Song came together.
Yeah, it's an unusual song to start the album with, but it gets you right into the spirit of things. And I'm thinking your vocal style too reminds me, of Nazareth, Guns N' Roses, that kind of background. Where do you get your influences from for your vocals?
A lot of different places. But I don't know. I was kind of raised on these types of voices. Like when I was growing up, I had two sides in my family, which was my mom and my dad. And my mom would listen to fantastic songwriters, you know, like Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and whatnot, which is what a lot of my lyrical ideas or how to write lyrics came from those guys, just in terms of poetry. But my dad, you know, is, I think, all-time four favorites were Led Zeppelin, Sabbath, Deep Purple, and Uriah Heep, and those are all just high singing men with fuzzy guitars. That was imprinted into my DNA. There was no escape, you know. Grew up and started listening to other bands and just kind of kept down that same path, you know. Got really into Smashing Pumpkins at some point, got really into the Mars Volta at some point. It just felt at home for some reason. Not that I only listen to dudes with high vocals, it just tends to come back for some reason.
Yeah, it's a badass sound for sure. So yeah, Hillbilly Fight Song gets you right into the thick of things. Then we have She's a Goth, or She's Still a Goth, and that one was a pretty touching song, actually.
Yeah, that one was more so a song for my wife than anything else. And it actually came about somewhere during the idea of it came about somewhere during the first lockdown, where everyone just kind of, I guess we just all got back into our roots for a little while there and just got really into listening the tunes we used to listen to. And she was listening to a lot of goth things, and we found a new goth band that we really liked, and we just listened to a lot of that. And I was like, you're still a goth at heart, at least. You still are. You've developed over the years, but you're you know, still the same person essentially. That's where the title came from initially, and then, you know, it just developed over time.
Yeah, and your wife's an excellent artist, by the way.
She's fantastic.
She does all your album covers, right?
She does, yeah.
Yeah, got a lot of people raving about, oh gosh, what was it? I think it was your first formal album that had the castle on it, like looked like Castle Grayskull.
Oh yeah.
Tarn. How would you say that? It's got a little accent mark on the A.
Yeah, but you said torn.
Torn, okay.
Yeah, but it does mean tower. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people really liked that album cover. All right, Morning Wood, and this is spelled a little bit differently. It's got the word mourn in it, M-O-U-R-N. So it's a kind of a play on words. What was the thought process here?
So that one and She's Still a Goth and Queen of the Gorgons on different places in the album are all kind of different sides of the same coin. Probably not a coin, it's like different sides of a three-sided die, you know. That's going through peaks and you know, depths in a relationship and everything as it's going. And Morning Wood was one of the more sadder ones, I guess, where but that also developed partially with someone on the inside, someone that I met there. Well, two people that I met that were they were in and out of a relationship and very, you know, really bad for each other. But they're I think they met in a mental health facility initially, which is, you know, that's not a good place to start a relationship.
Right.
You stop people from feeling that way, you know.
Right.
And I kind of used their back and forth thing then to help me write about the I guess the struggling side of a relationship, where with the lyrics where I'm like, we don't make it out after all, you know. It's like, because I don't know. And most of the time I feel triumphant. I'm like, yeah, woo, best couple in the world. And then other days I'm like, no, I'm probably gonna drive off a bridge and it's gonna be real sad. I won't, but I mean that kind of thing. So yeah, it was weird. It was a lot of conversation that I picked up between these two people, and that just served as a really great framework for me to write things that I was thinking at the same time. Yeah, and then Morning Wood just you know, it's a very sexually charged title, but I also found it, I like things that are really morbidly funny, and there was just something about that that stuck in my head. It's just like hooking up with someone at a funeral kind of vibe. It's just messed up, but it's got that, it's got something to it. You kind of enjoy the ring on the ear.
Well, speaking of funerals, next comes Rave to the Grave.
Yes, so that was a silly one. Just give me a second. Sorry, sure. I need to
go for it.
I'm going to continue speaking, but you won't be able to see my face because it is pitch dark and the power is only coming back at 8 o'clock, I believe, which is not ideal. I mean, 8 o'clock for me. I don't know what time it is over at yours right now.
Are they having like managed blackouts there or something?
Yeah, we've got, it's called load shedding. And basically, this is the second time today, and it's like this every day, where the power goes off for 4 hours at a time. So, wow. Yeah, for 8 hours in a day, you don't have power. One bit is in the morning, afternoonish, whatever, and then the other bit is late afternoon into evening. So it went off at 4 o'clock. It's now 6:30. It's only coming back at 8 again.
And what do they do during that time? Are they trying to upgrade equipment, or is that just simply to manage the demands of the populace?
Yeah, we've passed the point of no return in terms of fixing the infrastructure. A couple of months ago, this has been going for years, by the way. It started in 2010, and it's still going. But no, it started in 2007, I think. It's been a constant thing, but it's been progressively worse. Obviously, at first it was like you have 2 months during the year where you have some load shedding and it's not fun, but that's fine. And then it became a monthly occurrence, and then it became a weekly occurrence, and now it's daily. We're just kind of used to it. Everybody has generators. You won't be able to hear it over the phone, but like every house around me right now has their generator on, keep their power going and whatnot. It's a weird time to be alive in SA. It's really interesting. It especially sucks when it gets cold like this, because South Africa doesn't get as cold, as the US or Canada or other places that get super cold, but it does sometimes get really cold, like it is now. And none of these houses are built with insulation or whatever, because it's never been as necessary. And now, because there's no power, then you don't have your heaters and things working. And obviously the house loses some of the heat on the inside. So it gets really, really cold. But is what it is.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But Rave to the Grave was kind of another person that you met. Sounds like they're really into techno.
Grave was a person I met that everybody was sharing perspectives and stuff, and then obviously, what do you do for a living? And then it's like, oh, this person is this or this person is that. And my only go-to at the point was, because that was the last thing that I was doing, was I was like, yeah, okay, I'm a musician. That's what I have to share, basically. And then it's fun, you get a lot of supportive people being like, yeah, that's really cool. I like that. And would like to come to a show when everyone's out and whatnot. And then other people that are just friendly about it, they're just like, that's not my cup of tea, but you know what? It's fine. And then this one guy was just like, this sucks. I can't move to this at all. And I was like, okay. And he was like, yeah, you have to, it has to be this kind of dance music and that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I'm into all types of music, and I do like some dance music every now and then. And it's just not what I write, and also not what I'm going to put on to listen to. Which was really offended about for some reason.
People get personally hurt and offended when their view of the world is challenged. And I think this is just something naturally we all have, is sort of an ego-driven identity, and we develop it very early in life. My step-grandson is very much like that right now. He's 3 years old, and he wants everything to play out the way he wants it to. and it's just a stage, right? But at the same time, we all want to shape the world into our liking, and when there's other people who also want to shape the world into their liking, and we come into conflict, that's when things get interesting.
Yeah, and then there's a bit of a butting of heads, and it's, you know, it's not
Yeah.
a fun time. But so Rave to the Grave popped out very fast and organically because it was just, you know, just a really sarcastic, off the cuff take on what this dude had to say. And then initially I had, and I was like, well, this is very silly. I don't think we'll release it. And then at some point we were like, no, it's a pretty good song. We'll release it anyway. But it's, you know, it's just very sarcastic in all of its, yeah, the essence of the song is just a sarcastic throwback to this guy just being like, well, you don't need to like my song, man. It doesn't matter. And then it turned out to be the most poppy thing I ever wrote, which I think helped with the sarcasm side, because I was like, look, I can do it. I won't, but I can.
Right, there you go. I like that. Yeah, and I'll say this, like each song in succession, especially once you've heard the album already, it makes the flow really makes sense. It feels like a kind of like a rock opera in a way. Maybe opera is too dramatic a word, but you know,
no, but it has flow to
yeah,
it, I guess.
right.
And that was essentially the idea, because there were a lot of songs and there was groupings of how I thought this would flow. But when we eventually had all of them, they made sense in this order to stack up and kind of form a story, you know, even though they were written at different times, they were building blocks for one story to get to a point.
Cool. I'm really interested in delirium tremors. That sounds like maybe something you experienced personally.
Yeah, delirium tremors was mostly my thing. So by when I was heading in the first time, I was self-medicating a lot, as tends to happen with most people that have mental health issues, because you don't go and seek, you know, professional. I did, though. I went to doctors and whatnot. It took a while for them to be like, no, this is in your head. You know, at first people were like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And then it got to the point where they were like, no, you're physically tip-top shape. You're just, you know, not well mentally. So then, because nobody was helping me out in any way, well, that's how I perceived it, basically. I ended up self-medicating with, you know, all forms of what I could find. Chiefly of which probably was being alcohol, like a lot of alcohol, full blown fucking alcoholism. At some point where I had to drink. I obviously I didn't have to, but in my head I had to drink to be able to go to the shop, right? And it wasn't about being. It was like, oh, I need to go buy a bread, a milk, and I need to be around fucking people, so I need to have at least a glass of wine. And then if you drink that much, that constantly, a glass of wine doesn't do anything to you. It's just like that little bit of a comfort idea. It's like, yeah, okay, you're fine, this is cool, everything levels out and you're able to do these kinds of things. And that was the case for me. Basically, for everything I had an excuse for, or a reason for. Every time I had to do any particular thing, I had to have some alcohol to be able to do it. Which sucked, because obviously that started a ridiculous fucking spiral. And then it was a lot of drinking plus binge drinking and all that kind of shit. And then eventually you realize you're just literally drinking, not for any other purpose than to be drinking. You know, that was what it was. It wasn't a good time. It wasn't a bad time. It wasn't medication or whatever. It's just I had to keep consuming. So then going into the fucking first time I went in, I had to go fucking cold turkey, and that's not an ideal thing to. I didn't. So technically, I was supposed to not go cold turkey. I should have probably consulted with someone before, and they would have been like, "Yeah, okay, we'll try this medication just to get you kind of down to where you're supposed to be able to leave it all out." I hadn't known this, and I was being too headstrong or whatever. So I was just like, I can quit booze whenever I want, and I did. But then I didn't sleep for 2 weeks, and I was hallucinating, and
Wow.
thinking a heart attack probably 4 times a day. I was like, oh,
Jeez.
I'm dying.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yeah, that was probably, that was not a good idea. You could have died. And I was like, oh, fantastic, because I felt like I was dying for a while there. And yeah, Delirium Tremors was like a recounting of the before, just before that happened, and then the during, that was when it was happening. There was just the crazy, crazy noise. Everything was all over the place all the time. It was just, the absolute worst that could happen. Yeah, but then I did get in there, got some help from the mental side of things, but also, met a lot of alcoholics, which is interesting because you meet the most alcoholics ever in rehabilitation centers. You would expect you'd find them in bars, but they're not. They're in the rehabilitation centers. But that was really cool. Met a good friend in there, and we kind of had a lean on each other to get through that initial stretch of not being able to drink to, feel normal. So yeah, that's Delirium Tremors, more or less.
Yeah, that's really important to it's hard for me because I'm a very social person in certain contexts, but when it comes to something as personal as my own mental health, I don't really share with a lot of people. And I've had some chemical dependencies too. If I'd had somebody to kind of pace with, not somebody who was lording it over me like a sponsor or something like that, but and I know there's good sponsors in AA, so no offense to those who go through that method, but for me, like I think I would have benefited more from a peer-to-peer kind of relationship with somebody. And actually, there was one person who came along and was very helpful. So,
but that
happened a little bit later.
So to have, because it's that thing of you are in this position with somebody who's they're in the exact same position as you are. Like you
exactly.
hasn't gone past go again. It's not that whole thing. It's like it was both standing there, both having the worst time for the same reason. And that's great because you kind of figure it out together. And it helps a lot to have someone like that. So I'm happy to hear you also had someone in that kind of sphere that was able to, it's just good to have someone that's having the same experience as you, and it's weird because me and this buddy of mine, we don't talk much, haven't since. Every now and then we'll check in, we'll say happy birthday, that kind of thing, but both doing well with our own families and going on. But at that one point in time, it was so essential for the both of us to just have that other person there going through the same thing.
Right. Well, and then we come to track number 6, Cement Brain. Was this the first single that was released? I think it was.
No, I think it was the second.
Oh, maybe She's Still a Goth was the first.
Yeah. She's Still a Goth was Brain was second. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cement Brain has got that classic, what I consider the classic Ruff Majik sound to it. So I took to that one absolutely immediately, and it's still one of my favorites. But I find myself going back like third, fourth time listening and to the album and starring more songs now, which is neat.
That is interesting because that one felt to me like one of the least Ruff Majik songs, but that's
maybe I'm just singling out a certain aspect of it that feels really warm to me, but there's something about it that sounds really warm and at the same time earnest.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to me. I never know. Obviously, you have no idea how someone else is going to perceive something.
Sure.
And in my head, that one was not Ruff Majik-y at all, but I really loved the song. It's one of my absolute favorites from the album. It kind of continued on the story of Delirium Tremors, but that was, finding a more sober mindset again for the first time in forever, and just being like, please don't let me go back into the same thing again, because I was just there and it was horrible. I thought it was going to die for like 2 weeks straight. So that was just like a pleading of, let's not go back in that direction. Again, probably mostly related to this same dude that we were running through the same thing together. It just came to that point where we were both like, listen, if you touch this stuff again, I'm going to have to fuck you up, because, you know, we never really time around. Yeah. So that was an interesting one. And also one of my favorite things about that is the harmony guitar solo was inspired by the weirdest thing. It's a old Kid Cudi song that I think the original had MGMT featured on it, and they just had like this really slow, lysergic, harmonizing guitar thing going. And that, for some reason, was stuck in my head at the time we were recording. And that's what I wanted to not recreate, but kind of replicate that same feeling in a song. It just came out really cool. And it was a weird place to take inspiration from for this type of music with this type of record. But, you know, it worked out.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, I guess Elektrik Ram would begin the B side or in the A side, depending on how it lands. Is this coming out on vinyl?
It is out on vinyl, yes, and it is the first track on the B side.
Got it. What's the significance of the album title and the title of this song?
So, it ended up kind of in the middle. Not well, no, it is in the middle, and that was kind of the thing where it was the centerpiece, essentially. I think the vibe was, for that one, there's a lot of back and forth with religious imagery, I guess, that made part of it, but that was kind of a signaling of the one part of being, you know, down in the dumps and, you know, on a deathbed, literally just being plugged out and plugged in, that kind of vibe. And then just like a quick moment of triumph, because that's essentially what happens with mental health. As you know, you do have those moments where everything is like, you're like, fuck yeah, I did it. You know, it's working. Everything's fine, before it crashes again. And Elektrik Ram had that vibe for me. And it kind of just encapsulated for me what the album itself was, you know, going through the ebb and flow of this kind of thing, where some of the songs are triumphant and happy, and some of the songs are like really, really sad and, you know, down in the dumps kind of vibe. And Elektrik Ram was just like perfect half and a half of both, you know, just running through the whole experience in just like a condensed 2.5 minute song. And then also, which was you know, it just worked out that was the one we called Elektrik Ram, and it made sense in terms of album congruency, because we had the Devil's Cattle, and now we're like, okay, now we'll have a Ram, I guess.
Why not?
Yeah. Now, as we're sitting here, I'm already overthinking how to do the third. You know, if we do it like a trilogy, then I need an animal again. Some other farm animal. Maybe we'll just call it horse. You know, I don't know, but something like that.
Well, you did kind of an animal theme with your earlier EPs.
We did, yes. And I'm kind of into it again. It's not that I ever got not into it, but there was a while where I was like, yeah, maybe not animals for every album. And then we brought out the Devil's Cattle, and I was like, man, this is fire. And it looks so good, man. Animals just look really good when they're, you know. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens to the third one. But yeah, so it just made sense with Elektrik Ram. It was just the perfect formulation of everything that's in the album, but really condensed. And then, you know, luckily it had the right type of title as well.
Well, speaking of animals, we have a creature of sorts with the 8th track, Queen of the Gorgons.
Yes.
What's that? What's going on there?
So that again is reference to my wife. Like I said, those 3 songs kind of run in the same way, but that one's more was somebody called it wife worship, which I liked as a thing, but it sounds really funny. But that was more of at that point, that was just being in awe of who she was as a person, and being able to deal with what was happening with me at that time, and making it out through the other side, you know, when I was not there at all. So that was kind of the essence of this whole thing. But I do just love all sorts of mythology and, you know, B grade horror and all that kind of shit. And,
Me too. I'm hugely into it.
it's one of, just, you know, it just makes me so happy to be alive sometimes if I'm just able to switch on. Great. And this was, I got to the title when I was watching the old Clash of the Titans, the one with the claymation.
Yeah, Clash of the Titans.
Yeah. And
the old school one.
One of my favorites. It's so silly, but it's just so great.
Oh man, that the Medusa scene was just when I first saw it, I was a kid in the 80s, and you know, that scene in particular was very effective, even though maybe with the advance of film technology and computer animation, it might look a little silly now. Still, for me, going back, there's no beating the claymation effects.
Dude, and exactly. But even with that specific scene, with the really green, glowing emerald eyes thing, it was just such a powerful scene, you know. And that kind of got my head spinning and working at the time. And then that's where the title was from. I was like, yeah, well, sure, Medusa is the queen of the Gorgons, I guess. And I had that as a title, but I didn't know what it meant. You know, sometimes I just have a title that I have written down somewhere, and I'm like, I'll use that at some point. We'll find a song that makes sense. But then I started writing the lyrics to Queen of the Gorgons, and it all just kind of played together. And it became a thing of where it's kind of the roles flipped or whatever. So it's a case where Perseus, instead of going out to behead Medusa, is just like really into Medusa, you know, and in more of her as a character. And that was quite cool. Also getting into the actual mythology of it, because then I like to read up about things as I'm writing about it, to try and find more details on it. And the stories were written a certain way, obviously, but there's also in different parts of the mythology, you have a lot of respect and kind of compassion for Medusa and her, how she became what she was and how she ended up being the monster, whereas probably she wasn't supposed to be that. So that kind of just fed into the same lyrical line where I was like, okay, well, we flipped the script. She's not the bad guy. She's just, you know, this fantastic being that should be feared and adored at the same time.
Yeah, I like the deliberate flirting with danger there. I've got my sights set on you.
Yeah. Had to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, my.
Oh, that's all right. Well, I'll keep you just for the last three songs because I know you got things to do, but I am interested in finishing out the arc here. I obviously your humor is on full display as a band with the song title and occasionally with the lyrics. This one is pretty obvious about it. A song about drugs with a clever title.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite titles from this album, for the express reason that it wasn't supposed to be the title. That was a working title. I wrote it down because I knew I was going to write about my experience with using, and, you know, the kind of paranoia that came around with it, and that kind of bravado all around being thinking you're right and then you're definitely not right. I knew I was going to write about that, and I had most of the lyrics down or kind of shaping up, and then I didn't have a title, so I scribbled down, it's a song about drugs, and then in brackets I was like, with a clever title, I'll figure it out. It can't just be a song about drugs. And then I don't know, it was like a month or two later, I reread that little piece of paper, and I was like, oh, that's the title. That's fantastic. That's what it should have been from the get-go. And then we just kept it.
Nice. Cool. Shangri-La Incorporated, you mentioned that earlier in the interview. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so as I was saying, you were saying the same earlier as well. It's just that kind of dealing with this overbearing, overarching, omnipresent being of the world outside of the world, being, I guess, the internet and social media and, you know, the news and everything, just everything that encompasses what society is now, that's not actually face to face with other people. And I felt really unhappy with having to be plugged into that kind of thing. And I'm not going as far
Sure.
as saying the Matrix or whatnot, but you know what I'm saying. It's just
Yeah.
I hate that concept, and I would have loved to, like I said earlier, just be out in the woods and just living, but also at the same time have to contribute to the society, and you have to make money, and at the same time people are making money off of you whilst you're trying to do that, you know.
Hmm.
And that was kind of, I guess it's a protest song of sorts, where I was just lashing out against it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I think we need to have more sentiment in that direction, honestly. Like I said, it's examining this world we're born into, and that was set on course by our grandparents, great grandparents, far beyond that. It's just a continual evolution. But the question and the challenge facing every generation is, how do we make this system work for us without being swallowed up by it? So I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I guess the second part of it is and that's been something that's bugged the absolute hell out of me, but I mean, it still does every day. It's not just making the system work for me, it's ensuring that I don't end up leaving a even worse mess going
right.
out, you know.
Yeah,
Having
better to say, how can the system work for all of us, right?
Yeah. So that's the crux of the whole thing, is inheriting a broken system, and it's possible to fix it just enough to get by yourself, but it's fixing it more than enough so the next people, you know, can carry on. So it's a tough one.
The last song is Chemically Humanized, and right away I could identify with the sentiments of the title. The lyrics, really, what is it describing? Like, tell us.
So that was, um, I guess, going in and dealing with life at that point. That my first moments of clarity, um, I found by being, let's say, essentially chemically humanized, because I had to be medicated to be able to think clearly enough to do
Mm-hmm.
anything. And it was weird because then, um, after you've had like a different type of chemical dependency for long enough, you don't sleep. And when you sleep, you black out. You don't sleep, so you don't dream, nothing like that. Nothing happens, you know, and you don't think any clear thoughts. And then the first thoughts I had were these like really overbearing, intense thoughts that came down as a conversation, I guess, between me and, um, well, it's a tough one to say. So I lost my dad a couple of years ago, quite a couple of years ago, like end of 2018, to cancer, and it was terrible. It hit the family very hard or whatever. But I kind
Mm.
of pressured it down in a certain sense, and that in turn, with a lot of other things that happened, had caused me PTSD that I didn't notice because of the compartmentalizing and pushing things down, which eventually, when COVID hit, it just came in full swing, you know, and gave me all of the other things that came along with it. So then the PTSD manifested in anxiety disorder, which I didn't realize at first. And then it became full-blown panic disorder, which became agoraphobia, you know, and substance dependency, and then hallucinating and all of the crazy shit. So it just, you know, slowly but surely went completely off the fucking rails. And that was a really big part for me. And there was a communication, I guess, that I always wanted to have with my dad, but it was more, I don't know how to explain it exactly. It was more actually something that I had to sort out with myself, a conversation that I had to have with myself that I wasn't able to get through because my mind was just overwhelmed. And there's, you know, it tried to harken back to the last time I was happiest, and that's when my dad was still alive. And then I felt like, but there was something I needed to sort out with him, or something that I needed to say to him, and he needed to reply back to me for me to be okay. And then during my moment of chemical clarity, finally, when I became chemically humanized again, let's call it that, I did have a dream, and it was one of the most surreal, weirdest dreams. where I was in Norway. I don't know, this sounds strange, with my dad, and we were just on the ocean, just swimming, just basically, well, floating on our backs, and the ocean was fucking dark, like black as tar kind of thing, which usually would freak me the fuck out. But it didn't matter in the dream because it was my dad was there, you know, and the whole dream, the thing was, I just kept trying to speak to him and be like, listen, I've got these things that I was supposed to say to you, and you're supposed to tell me these things, and we've got some time now, so we should do it. And the whole dream, he didn't speak a word. He was just like, shh, like really calmingly. And we just floated there. That was the whole dream. I eventually woke up from that, and I felt super light, I guess, you know, and happy. And I was, fuck, I feel like this whole weight has been lifted.
Right.
Because this time I've been trying to communicate with a fucking ghost, but actually I was just trying to communicate with myself. I wasn't able to get through to it, you know. I'm sorry, that's a very hippy dippy way of explaining what happened.
No, it's basically, honestly, all that hippie stuff is making more and more sense to me as I go on in life, right?
Yeah. And I think that's at the point, it's all that I really desperately needed was actually to get through to myself and realize that I didn't need the reply I thought I was wanting. I just needed a conversation with myself about this, you know. And it ends heart-wrenching because at the time I was feeling super fucking sad, and I was like, well, I wish I could just fucking die, you know. Which is not the case anymore because obviously it helped, but it was the right place for the story of Elektrik Ram to end because that's where things were happening, you know.
Yeah, especially like the verse that says, I tried to steal the devil's note, I even borrowed David's chord, but all the poetry I wrote never seemed to please the Lord, no, not at all. David's chord, would that be a reference to the psalmist David and how he played the harp to soothe King Saul's anxieties?
Indeed, yes. And then obviously various versions of the devil's note and what people also thought.
It's interesting contrast, isn't it? The devil's note, try on the one hand, and then David's chord on the other, and neither of them kind of did the trick to calm your spirit.
Yeah, none of them did the thing, you know. They didn't help. And that's also just, I guess, a condensed version of saying it doesn't. You're going to keep running and trying to fix things for forever, but eventually it doesn't work, you know. You just have to slow down and accept some help from somewhere just to make, you know, realize that it's not going to pan out the way you think it's going to pan out. Because I was, you know, basically killing myself back then with workloads and doing everything I possibly could just to escape, you know. And main form of escapism was music, and I always thought, you know, I just have to write that one fucking thing, that one thing that's going to just, you know, unite the masses and, well, please the Lord in essence. And it just fucking did. You know?
It's there's a lot. I'm so glad that you included the lyrics on Bandcamp. It's I think I just lost him. We'll get him back here, but I'm really glad that Johni and team included the lyrics on Bandcamp. Sometimes bands get a little crazy about those things. They want you to kind of listen closely enough, or maybe just wonder what the lyrics are. I think that's total crap. So if you guys want to support the band and thank them for what they're doing to advance music and to really let us in on what's going on in the songwriting, please check them out. Ruff Majik, that's spelled RuffMajik. So there's no C in there, it's a K instead. ruffmajik.bandcamp.com, or you can just search out Ruff Majik and get them. The album's out on Mongrel Records, which is a South African label. And so we are so grateful for Johni being a part of the program today. I think with the blackouts, there was no way for him to charge his cell phone, so it just kind of went out. But we're hugely grateful to him and to the band. And again, check out Elektrik Ram, fresh out by Ruff Majik from South Africa. This has been Billy Goat, another Doom discussion, part of our series at doomedandstone.com. Just kind of get in and talk about the music and the people behind it. And now my health is on the up. I'm starting to do more of this. So thank you guys for checking us out. We'll talk to you later. Do them on until we meet again.